Growing up in a small town, I admired people who overcame their circumstances to achieve greatness. My brother Jeff and I shared that admiration, though our lives were often shaped by circumstance. Watching the Maple Grove Mills, a key part of our community, decline after being taken over by outside investors was tough. As the local economy crumbled, so did the town's spirit, and I realized real change had to come from within. Years later, after establishing our careers, an opportunity arose. We co-founded Falcon Associates with Lucy, Dennis, and Marty, aiming to not just revive a business, but to restore a way of life that was disappearing. Although none of us could predict the challenges ahead, we were hopeful. We each earned $250,000 annually, reasonable for a startup in a risky industry, with standard benefits. To address Jeff's security concerns, we hired a firm for ongoing protection. Lucy and Dennis also opted to keep their families out of the public eye. In case of the worst, we all had life insurance policies worth $10 million to protect our families. I'm Roger Richardson, born and raised in Rose Valley. You'll notice I didn't call it home, and that's central to my story. Jeff and I weren't mill kids. Our parents ran Richardson's Garden, the town's only Chinese restaurant. Opened in 1947 by our grandparents, it's still operated by our mom today. My grandfather, a veteran and son of Portland restaurateurs, saw an opportunity in Rose Valley to open a place catering to soldiers returning from the Pacific who craved Asian flavors. The restaurant originally kept some of the menu from the coffee shop it replaced, including the famous fried chicken recipe, which is still served every Friday. My grandparents lived above the restaurant until they built a house and tea garden behind it after my dad was born. When Grandpa passed and Grandma retired, my parents took over and Jeff and I spent our childhood afternoons there under Grandma's care. My childhood friend Kathy Henderson lived next door to my grandparents' house. Her father was a sheriff's deputy, and her mom worked part-time at Richardson's Garden. When we were kids, Kathy told her mom she would marry me someday. And we did. We stayed close through school, and after Kathy graduated we both went to Portland State University. In 2001 I earned my MBA, Kathy got her accounting degree, and Jeff passed the Oregon bar. We all returned to Rose Valley to start our careers. Jeff as a lawyer, Kathy as an accountant for Maple Grove, and me as an engineer. Kathy and I had been unofficially engaged since childhood, but we made it official after returning home, getting married that September. In 2002, tragedy struck. Kathy's dad was eliminated in an accident, and later that year my dad passed away from pancreatic cancer. Our moms decided to live together, and Kathy and I moved into my childhood home, where we started our family. Our daughter, Lana, was born on October 24, 2003. She was perfect. Rose Valley had always seemed insulated from national economic swings, especially with Maple Grove Mills producing goods people always needed. However, when the housing crisis hit, even our town felt the impact. Though we didn't have the large homes sprouting up elsewhere, many locals were lured into refinancing at low rates, only to find themselves in deep debt when the bubble burst in 2008. That's when Daniel Moore, president of Moore Equity Partners, appeared. His private equity firm offered to buy Maple Grove Mills, promising salvation for those struggling with mortgages. The town split between those supporting and opposing the buyout. I was against it, believing Congress might offer relief soon, and that Moore's offer undervalued the company. Plus, Moore himself came off as arrogant, and something about him felt off. Despite these concerns, most people voted for the sale, enticed by the money that would help pay off their debts. In October 2008, Maple Grove Mills became Maple Grove Incorporated, ending its 102-year local ownership. Problems began right away. Local farmers were forced to lower prices, quality control issues emerged, and even the packaging suffered. Yet management claimed everything was fine because profits and sales were up. I couldn't understand how such poor management could still run a profitable company. My concerns grew, and I began to question if I should leave and help my mom run Richardson's Garden instead. Kathy, my wife, didn't share my worries, insisting it wasn't our responsibility as employees to care about the company's direction, as long as paychecks kept coming. Our conversations about work became fewer, and Kathy wasn't happy about my thoughts of quitting. Meanwhile, Lana's solution to my frustrations was hosting tea parties with her dolls, which always made me smile. In January 2009, a new president took office, and the government rolled out programs to help homeowners. While some still debate whether these programs worked, I remain frustrated that we couldn't convince the mill's employees to hold out and try for a better solution. By summer 2009, it was clear this wasn't just another recession. The economy was in freefall, and despite reporting record profits, Maple Grove started laying off employees for the first time since the Great Depression. Management assured us the layoffs wouldn't be long-term, and that severance benefits would help. However, it was clear that the 30% let go were mostly those who had opposed the sale to more equity partners. "You'll get your kitchen job after all," Kathy mocked as we waited for my turn to be fired. I ignored her, focusing instead on spending time with Lana. When HR called me, I told Sharon, the manager, to skip the severance talk. I refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement or waiver. Sharon, who had also voted against the buyout, understood my frustration. We parted on good terms, and I invited her to dinner at the restaurant sometime. After leaving, I picked Lana up from school. Kathy didn't answer her phone, so I called her and Lana's grandmothers to let them know they wouldn't need to pick Lana up. Something fell off when I got home, and I soon found Kathy's note on the kitchen table. She said she was leaving me for someone better, taking Lana, and if I didn't sign the divorce papers, I'd never see my daughter again. I immediately called Jeff, telling him what happened. He urged me to leave the house and bring the note to his office. Once there, Jeff and his boss, Alex, quickly read the note. Alex explained that Kathy's plan had failed. She intended to take Lana while I was busy in an exit interview, probably heading out of state. Jeff asked if I knew who she was leaving me for, but I had no idea. Likely one of the managers Moore had brought in, though Kathy never mentioned names. Alex reassured me that Oregon law prioritizes the child's best interests, not the parent's gender, and that Kathy's threat would work against her in court. He explained that since Lana was with me and we had a strong family support system, Kathy's note would backfire. Threatening to withhold a child to force a spouse to sign divorce papers would be a major strike against her in custody decisions. We filed a counterclaim, arguing that Kathy's plan to take our daughter and use threats to force my signature on the divorce papers proved she shouldn't have custody. Since I left work early and picked up Lana, her plan failed. The court granted me temporary custody, and we prepared for a legal fight. It wasn't long before Kathy's someone better was revealed. Daniel Moore. Not surprising, right? Moore's arrogance and wealth worked against him in court. Jeff became my lead attorney with Alex advising. The sight of Moore's expensive legal team trying to bulldoze a small-town lawyer representing a newly unemployed father fighting for his daughter didn't sit well with the judge. Kathy's own mother testified in my favor, offering to help me care for Lana, and her support sealed the case. When Kathy's threatening note was shown in court, Moore's lawyers looked visibly uncomfortable. The judge took Kathy's note at face value, ruling that she'd given up her claim to any marital assets. Our house and family business were in my mom's name, so the assets were limited to cars, IRAs, and bank accounts. More importantly, the judge agreed that Kathy's threats showed she didn't have Lana's best interests in mind. I was granted full custody of Lana, with Kathy allowed supervised visitation. Moore showed up on the last day of the trial expecting victory, but left looking shocked and defeated. That night we closed the restaurant to celebrate privately. I spent most of it comforting Kathy's mother Nancy, who had supported me in court. A few weeks later Kathy married Daniel Moore and moved to Los Angeles. Though she flew back to Oregon for weekly visits with Lana, things were difficult. Kathy and her mom often got into shouting matches during the visits, and after one especially bad argument, Nancy banned her from the house. We moved visits to the restaurant where Kathy's mother would sit outside, keeping a close eye on her. My idea of returning to the restaurant full-time was premature. With my mom still running it and no plans to retire, I wasn't needed. Then, my former boss from Maple Grove, Marty, who was also fired, stopped by to discuss starting a new business with other ex-managers. I immediately agreed to join them. The idea behind our new business, Falcon, was to unite the suppliers that Maple Grove had dropped or lowballed and create a cooperative. We aimed to produce high-quality products and sell them to boutique natural food retailers who were rejecting Maple Grove's lower-quality goods. Our advantage was the good relationships we had built as the former management team at Maple Grove. Since we weren't operational yet, Marty would handle production when the time came. My role was to apply my MBA, drafting a business plan to secure funding and a marketing plan to convince suppliers we could sell what we produced. Then I got the call. "Roger," Jeff shouted when I picked up. "What's going on?" I asked, worried by his tone. "Kathy tried to take Lana, Nancy tried to stop her, and now both are in the hospital." "It's bad, Roger. You need to get here." I dropped everything and sped home with Jeff filling me in. Kathy had tried to take Lana during her visit. When Nancy intervened, Kathy's driver pepper-sprayed her. Despite being in pain, Nancy chased after them. When Lana saw her grandma fall, she broke free and ran back. But she was struck by a truck. The driver wasn't at fault, he just couldn't stop in time. Nancy died in the ER, and Lana lingered in a coma for 8 days before passing. She would have turned 7 the next month. After that, I shut down emotionally. I vaguely remember the doctor telling us Lana was gone, then somehow finding myself in the restaurant kitchen days later cutting up a chicken without remembering how I got there. My family watched over me, making sure I didn't hurt myself. Arrangements were made for both funerals. I learned Nancy had named me her next of kin and left everything to Lana and me in her will. As her only son-in-law, and with no sons of her own, I was responsible for her final arrangements. I couldn't live in the house anymore, it was too painful. I moved into Jeff's apartment and Gene moved into the house, as he needed to be close to the restaurant. Mom stayed with me most of the time but returned to the house to sleep. Kathy and her driver were arrested at the scene. Witnesses told the police what had happened. The DA charged Kathy with first-degree custodial interference, and the driver with second-degree hijacking. The driver was also charged with third-degree attack for pepper-spraying Nancy. Because these were felonies, they both faced 2 counts of felony liquidation for the end of lives of Nancy and Lana, with sentences of up to 25 years. At the arraignments, Jeff and Alex presented Kathy's prior threat to take Lana and the fact that she had left me for a wealthy out-of-state man, whose driver was involved. The judge deemed both Kathy and the driver flight risks and denied bail. The DA warned us they might not be convicted but expected a plea deal. Jeff asked if Moore's involvement could be proven, but the DA doubted it. They tried offering leniency in exchange for implicating Moore, but neither Kathy nor the driver cooperated. In the end, they pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree manslaughter and received concurrent sentences, eligible for parole after serving 6 years. I didn't submit a sufferer statement at their sentencing. While some feel satisfaction or closure after a sentencing, I felt nothing. The following months were a blur, with time flying when I was working and crawling when I wasn't. Nights were the hardest and I buried myself in work to cope. One day while working in the tea garden, I received a call from a woman named Sophie Soulis, asking to speak with me on behalf of Eamon Soulis, a billionaire shipping magnate. Eamon wanted to discuss a partnership, so I agreed to meet him. 3 days later, I checked into Timberline Lodge. There was a message waiting for me, inviting me to dinner at a nearby luxury condo. When I arrived, I was greeted by Eamon and Sophie, his daughter-in-law. After dinner, Eamon explained that he and Sophie had their own experience with Daniel Moore. Eamon believed Moore was responsible for his son Armand's liquidation. Armand Soulis had risen from humble beginnings, amassing a fortune through illegal means before changing his ways to win the love of his wife Manon. She inspired him to dedicate his wealth to good causes, founding the Manon Soulis Foundation to combat poverty and exploitation. After her end of life, their son André took over the foundation. The foundation became involved in negotiations in the impoverished state of St. Lawrence, where a deal was being made to fund schools and hospitals in exchange for granting over 500,000 acres of rainforest to an energy and mining cartel. The foundation proposed an alternative plan, funding fewer schools, but protecting the land from deforestation and exploitation. The president of St. Lawrence had welcomed André Soulis for a summit with local officials and tribal leaders. However, their plane disappeared over the rainforest, and shortly after, the vice president took over as president. The disappearance was blamed on eco-terrorists, and negotiations with the Soulis Foundation ended abruptly. The deal with the mining cartel, funded by Moore Equity Partners, was quickly pushed through, leading to the destruction of the rainforest. "You saw that coming, didn't you?" Eamon said bitterly. He believed Moore's money had motivated the vice president, though he blamed the new president for his son's end of life. I recall Jeff's words to our DA about Moore being behind my family's tragedy. Eamon admitted he wanted revenge but resisted because his late wife Manon and son wouldn't have approved. Sophie, his daughter-in-law, also firmly opposed any violent actions. Eamon shared a photo of his grandchildren, explaining that yielding to his darker instincts could cost him his relationship with them. When I asked why we were meeting, Eamon explained that Sophie had agreed he needed to act, but within legal and ethical bounds. Sophie then presented a folder detailing Moore's destructive business practices, including his acquisition of a bakery in Illinois. After initial growth, the company collapsed, leaving hundreds jobless, part of a pattern seen with other companies including Maple Grove Mills. Eamon's proposal was clear. Someone needed to rescue these companies and prove that businesses could succeed with integrity. He suggested I take the lead, using my experience battling Moore in the divorce and custody case as a public face. Eamon and Sophie couldn't act directly, as it would look like rich people playing with businesses, but I could step in as someone with a personal stake. Skeptical, I asked if we could really succeed. Eamon pointed out that we were already trying to start a business based on integrity. He offered to provide the resources, ensuring the rescued companies wouldn't fail, unlike Moore's ventures. Sophie clarified that they wouldn't fake profits like Moore, but truly support the company's growth. Eamon promised that even if the venture ultimately failed, workers would benefit from restored jobs and a soft landing. I agreed to discuss the plan with my associates, ensuring complete transparency with them. The Falcon Group consisted of 4 members. Marty Ball, my former Maple Grove manager, Lucy Armstrong, Kathy's ex-manager in finance, Dennis McCoy, Maple Grove's former tech manager, and me. We hadn't yet decided on my role beyond drafting business and marketing plans. Jeff and Alex were involved for legal counsel, as they would handle our legal affairs if we officially became a business. We met at the restaurant, reviewing the proposal from Timberline while having dinner. Marty and Lucy were impressed, while Dennis agreed as he sampled a new dish. Lucy questioned the legality and Alex explained that as a privately owned company, the plan was legal, as long as no false claims were made to investors or lenders. Marty noted this clarified my role in Falcon as heading business development and marketing, though Jeff expressed concern. He pointed out that Eamon wanted me as the public face of the venture, which could put me in Moore's crosshairs if we succeeded in tarnishing his reputation. Jeff's worries were valid, but we moved forward regardless. We drafted a counter-proposal addressing these concerns and our group, including Jeff and Alex, returned to meet with Eamon and Sophie to finalize the details. Falcon Associates was established as a New Mexico Anonymous LLC, where the owners' identities remained private. Jeff and Alex would represent us individually, while a separate attorney would serve as corporate counsel. Eamon and Sophie owned 50% of the company, and the 4 of us owned the other 50%, ensuring no single party had control. We agreed to make decisions as a unified block. Externally, we would appear as employees of Falcon, Marty as Director of Operations, Lucy as Director of Finance, Dennis as Director of Technology, and I as Managing Director. Whether I would also lead business development and marketing was undecided until we understood the resources available in the companies we aimed to rebuild. We set equal salaries of $250,000 per year, reasonable for a high-risk startup. We also arranged standard executive benefits and a 24/7 security hotline for our families. Lucy and Dennis opted to stay out of the public eye due to their families, and each of us had a $10 million life insurance policy for worst-case scenarios. A week after signing the agreements, Eamon informed us our salaries and benefits were in effect, and Falcon had $100 million in working capital with a $100 million reserve. Lucy was stunned when the financial statement arrived. It was a fraction of Eamon's wealth, but more than any of us had ever expected to manage. 3 weeks later, the Illinois baking company closed, leaving 316 workers unemployed. Soon after, Falcon Associates LLC successfully bid to acquire Pathway Bakeries Inc. for $28 million, with plans to reopen the facility by mid-December. Falcon's managing director Roger Richardson stated their goal was to rebuild Pathway with a focus on people and quality, correcting the toxic culture under its previous owners. Falcon's acquisition was big news in Kelton, Illinois, a town hit hard by job losses since 2007. Former Pathway workers like Rena and Andy Dean felt betrayed by more equity partners, who had promised work before suddenly shutting down the plant. Now, just before Christmas, Falcon had acquired the plant and planned a public meeting to discuss its future. At the meeting, held at Kelton High School, the 600-seat auditorium was packed, with many attendees bringing their families. Former employees had each received an envelope, which they were instructed to open during the meeting. Inside were rehire letters offering them their jobs back, along with a $1,500 prepaid Visa card to help with holiday expenses. Roger Richardson, along with Marty Ball, explained that while the plant wouldn't be operational by Christmas due to neglected equipment, employees would return to work in stages starting in 2 weeks. Health insurance benefits had already been reinstated, and all salaries and seniorities would be preserved. The crowd responded with cheers, applause, and tears of relief. The night ended with a buffet in the school gym, where Falcon Associates officially welcomed back the Pathway workers and their families. I couldn't resist one more jab during interviews after the meeting, highlighting how the new Pathway would succeed on quality and integrity, everything the previous owners lacked. That evening we shook hands with soon-to-be employees and their families, who just weeks earlier had lost hope. Seeing the change in their eyes was uplifting. As we headed to the hotel, Marty asked, "Think any of this is getting back to more?" "No clue," I replied, "but it feels pretty good." Headline: Falcon Gifts Displaced Pathway Workers, $1,500 December 12, 2011, Kelton Record. Falcon Associates surprised former Pathway workers by giving them $1,500 Visa gift cards. Falcon, based in Albuquerque, plans to reopen the Kelton next week, initially hiring 70 workers, with hopes of rehiring all 300 by February. Mary Gladden, a former employee, was brought to tears by the unexpected generosity. "I didn't think I could give my kids much this Christmas. Now I can." Falcon's announcement made headlines nationwide. Videos from the meeting went viral, and news stories popped up with titles like "Pathway Rises from the Ashes" and "Miracle on Kelton Boulevard." One article even dubbed me the new George Bailey, while Daniel Moore was portrayed as Scrooge McMore. Unsurprisingly, media attention turned to who we were. The press unearthed my divorce from Kathy, her marriage to Daniel Moore, and the tragic end of lives of Lana and Nancy. Although I declined to discuss my personal tragedy, we knew the story would eventually surface. It had all the elements of a soap opera. A wealthy millionaire fires a third of a town's workers, seduces a fired worker's wife, loses in court, and is ultimately linked to a tragic hijacking attempt that ends in 2 end-of-lives. Then, the fired worker and his former colleague start a new company and rescue another community left jobless by the same millionaire. You couldn't script it better. Some stories were tough to watch, especially one that revisited the site where Lana and Nancy were eliminated. I had to turn it off when the reporter filmed the small family altar inside the restaurant, where my mom burns incense in front of photos of my grandparents, Dad, Lana, and Nancy. Jeff denied involvement in the ambush interview that confronted Moore outside his LA condo, where a reporter asked if he felt responsible for Lana and Nancy's end-of-lives or Kathy's imprisonment. Moore's angry response, yelling something about failing and losers, was the hardest hit he'd taken yet. If Jeff did have a hand in it, I could live with that. The question of whether I would be just the face of the new Pathway or take on a hands-on role in business development, marketing, and sales was answered with a clear yes. Pathway's former non-Moore managers were eager to return, but they needed guidance to shift from restoring the old Pathway to building a new one that could address modern markets. Since I had been the one to present the $1,500 gift cards and make promises about rebuilding together, it naturally fell to me to rally the team and get them excited about the future. It took 4 months to get the Pathway plant fully operational due to years of neglect under Moore's management. We faced safety violations, deferred maintenance, and had to replace outdated equipment. We also upgraded the office tech, replacing all the computers and saving the hard drives for a secret data project. The rest was donated to local schools and nonprofits. We invested in our workforce as well. Employees who hadn't yet returned full-time received training, either to update their skills or prepare for new equipment like robots. When asked if robots would lead to job cuts, Marty explained the goal was higher output with the same workforce, much like in the past when output doubled without increasing headcount. Concerns about selling more Pathway products after the decline in quality were addressed by focusing on rebuilding trust with former customers. Our message, Pathway is back and better than ever. We also expanded into new markets like organics, sugar-free, gluten-free and grain-free products, which had been ignored under Moore's management, but were now growing in demand. As it turned out, the U.S. gluten-free market grew by over 60% in the next 4 years. Our gluten-free product line, launched in summer 2012, accounted for nearly a third of our revenue, cementing my reputation within Pathway's marketing team. Meanwhile, Maple Grove Mills, having let go of the marketing analysts we hired as consultants, completely missed the gluten-free boom. The first year of New Pathway felt like my time working on the Falcon Cooperative, but on a much larger scale. Instead of driving around Oregon and Washington building relationships, I was flying across the U.S., working on new and renewed partnerships for Pathway. Many of these renewals were with businesses the old Pathway had alienated due to poor quality, late shipments and billing issues. Even though we rehired Pathway's marketing and sales teams, many clients insisted on hearing directly from me, the new managing director, that the problems under Moore's ownership were gone. I never missed the chance to emphasize that we were a new company, completely separate from Moore's Pathway. The PR efforts paid off, sales began to rise, and we signed contracts to produce store-branded products. While this might seem like competition for our own products, the store brands didn't cost us anything for distribution or advertising, so the profit margins were nearly the same. Our business plan was working. We held 2 meetings each quarter. The Pathway meeting included the entire company, where senior management met in the boardroom, and everyone else could log in online. Though not required as a private company, we valued transparency. The Falcon meeting was private, just the 4 of us, Eamon, Sophie, and our legal team. Eamon, as the majority shareholder, could have led these meetings, but he and Sophie preferred to remain silent partners, so we rotated the responsibility. At our 3rd meeting, marking 1 year since Falcon Associates was formed, Lucy chaired the session. After reviewing the usual updates, sales, plant performance, morale and tech projects, Lucy revealed the financials. Pathway would end Q4 in the black, a year ahead of projections. This surprise came from an unplanned contract with Champion Markets. I had met their CEO at a trade show and pitched our private label services. When Champion expanded into the Southwest, their existing supplier became overwhelmed, so we took over their hard-baked snack line. It was a win-win with no job losses, and the deal looked promising for long-term success. The New Pathway's first holiday party was on December 21, 2012, our last workday of the year. The company provided the main dishes and employees brought potluck items. Families and kids were invited, with someone dressed as Santa, not me. We screened It's a Wonderful Life in the conference room, and I jokingly told the kids that Mr. Potter's first name was Daniel. Never miss an opportunity. After a gift exchange under $20, gag gifts encouraged, we held a prize drawing and packed up leftovers for people to take home. Before everyone left, I announced, "We appreciate all your hard work this year, and when you receive your final checks there will be a little extra." Applause followed. "It's not a Christmas bonus," I added. "It's profit sharing." Headline: Falcon shares profits with Pathway workers. December 24, 2012, Kelton record. A cheer erupted at Pathway's holiday party when Falcon Associates Managing Director, Roger Richardson, announced a profit-sharing bonus. Each employee received $500. Pathway employs 325 full-time workers. "As a private company, we don't disclose earnings," Richardson said, "but this year's profits are being shared equally among all employees to show our appreciation for their hard work. We are building a new Pathway from the ruins of its predecessor. Never miss an opportunity." The next shot in our battle with Daniel Moore came unexpectedly. After Maple Grove Mills laid off 150 workers, businesses in Rose Valley felt the impact, especially restaurants. I used some of my Falcon salary to help cover bills at Richardson's Garden, and my mom and cousin Jean had health insurance through Falcon. In January, Jeff told me about a strange pattern at the restaurant. Fired Maple Grove employees were coming in more often and buying takeout for their friends still working at the mill. Mom learned that Richardson's Garden had been removed from Maple Grove's list of approved caterers, with management implying there would be repercussions for employees who continued to patronize the restaurant. Rumor had it that this decision came after Daniel Moore threw a tantrum, shouting he would ruin those chinks. I shared this with Eamon and Sophie, and Eamon called a teleconference. "I think we're getting to him," I said. Jeff agreed. Eamon raised a concern about security. We decided to bring in Grey Bear Security, who specialized in blending into their surroundings while providing protection. We hired a new waiter for Richardson's Garden, a retired Navy chief named Duke, pronounced Duque, who also drove for Mom and moved into a spare room at her house to assist her if needed. According to Mom, Duke was an excellent waiter and driver. Eamon made some calls, and a TV chef who featured small-town eateries came to Rose Valley. He visited local spots including a breakfast house, brewery and an artisan baker, who praised his stone-ground flour from a historic gristmill. The crew deliberately showed the chef driving past Maple Grove Mills without stopping, but they highlighted Richardson's Garden. Mom and Jean impressed the chef with special dishes from their secret Chinese menu, turning the restaurant into a minor gourmet destination. The extra business more than made up for the loss caused by Moore's attempted embargo. Word got back that Moore was furious that Richardson's Garden wasn't struggling, but had actually expanded its staff. Jeff and Alex hired a new paralegal, a former deputy sheriff who lost her job when a county bond failed. She rented a room from Alex and his wife and carpooled with them. Meanwhile, Marty, Lucy and Dennis opted against full-time security, but added someone to the Pathway security team. They also hired a nanny to shuttle their kids between school and home, helping them manage their busy work-from-home schedules. I hired an executive assistant, Rebecca Sullivan, a former Navy NCO who had handled maltreatment from a superior officer by putting him in the hospital. Her story of taking him down impressed both Marty and me. Marty said, "She's perfect for you," comparing her attitude toward power misusers to mine when talking about Moore.